You know I ain't come to play, let's turn me up. Snapping off the rip. Play, let's turn me up. Snap.
I just want y'all to know this is just a matter of time before I got to this topic, but I do enjoy talking about these topics, and I'm full of energy today, so I'm recording 2 videos in one day, probably going to upload them both. If you are seeing this, it's probably going to be either today, the 28th, or it'll be the 29th. Or I just may wait to May and make it an even Friday schedule for both of them. But as long as this channel has been alive, I have wanted to talk about the stereotypes that are presented against black people. Specifically black people, because as you know, I'm a pro-black man and yada, yada, yada. Watch my other videos if you want any backstory. I'm not going to summarize anything. I'm getting right into it, and that's how it is. Off rip. Just wanted to talk to y'all. Let me just tell you something. The definition of a stereotype is a widely held but fixed, oversimplified image or idea of a particular type of person or thing. Second definition, it is a relief printing plate cast in a mold made from composed type or original plate. Verb for the third person is to view or represent as a stereotype. Okay. Now that we have that out the way, we have the definition of stereotype, because most people will not know it, and everything I'm talking about will probably go over your head. Not saying that you're dumb, but sometimes certain things just need to be said. Okay, that's all I'm gonna say. I'm not saying anybody's dumb, but this article from the Smithsonian kind of highlights some of the popular and persuasive stereotypes of the African Americans. And these are kind of among the more than 100 items, related to stereotypes in the NMAAHC collection, including a lithogram depicting a pig knocking over a zip cone, an original print of Professor Charles Carroll's book, The Negro, a Beast, or In the Image of God, postcards depicting a caricature boy eating a slice of watermelon circa 1909, and a coin bank in the form of a mammy seated at the chamber pot. So one of the biggest ones coming out, I think, of 1850s, 1860s on into the 1900s was a depiction of a mammy. All right, so you gotta understand, slavery was not ended until quote unquote 1863. It was then ratified. It was talked about in 1863, ratified in 1865, and most people didn't know that, those black folks didn't know that they was free until 1869, 1865. One of those, it was like 67, 65, 66, one of those times. And 68, that's what it was. This is 1868. 3 whole years after it had been ratified by Congress, and 5 whole years since it was ever spoken into existence. During that time, and I want to tell you, during that time, there was many depictions of black women who would typically use as wet nurses for the the slave owner children. I'm not going to say Caucasian because they were of European descent at this point. So I'm going to just say as the slave owners, wet nurses, so that they could breastfeed their children. Okay, so the depiction of this is this big-lipped, dark-skinned black woman with a red bandana over her head and the tackiest clothes I've ever seen of any era, but they didn't really give us much back then, so you gotta kind of bear with it. And she was always meant to serve somebody. It was never a moment where it was her in control or anything. She was meant to be controlled by somebody, and that was the depiction that they had for black women at that time, that they were meant to be servants of something or someone. They were meant to be a sex slave. They were meant to be they were meant to be a house slave, a field slave, a child bearer, a wet nurse, or whatever they needed them to be, and they're supposed to be obedient all the same. And if you go back and listen to my season 2 opener, if I'm not mistaken, for the Young Black Voices podcast that I did early last year, maybe even late last year, to probably during the summertime, you will get a full in-depth synopsis. Well, not even in-depth, full partially full synopsis or a dumbed down one, a very simplified one of how Willie Lynch made slaves and the ramifications that it has and how the women were treated and how they were brought up to have a slave mindset that carried on, and then that was why it's being portrayed as that, that is in all hindsight one of the most disgusting stereotypes that face black women. There's nothing wrong with their luscious lips or how their body is shaped. It is just insecure people doing insecure things to make themselves feel better, and frankly they just didn't care about us, which is the story of African Americans in this country. However, that would be short-lived, as the mammy stereotype, well, not even short-lived. Give you what the article says. The mammy stereotype developed as an offensive racial caricature constructed during slavery and popularized primarily through minstrel shows. Enslaved black women were highly skilled domestic works, working in the home of white families and caretaker for the children. The trope painted a picture of a domestic worker who had undying loyalty to their slave holders as caregivers or counsel. This image ultimately sought to legitimize the institution of slavery. The mammy stereotype gained increased popularity after the Civil War and into the 1900s. During this time, her robust, grinning likeness was attached to mass-produced consumer goods from flour to motor oil. Considered a trusted figure in white immigration, mammies represented a contentment and served as nostalgia for whites concerned about racial equality. So I just want y'all to know that last phrase, considered a trusted figure in whites imagination. I said immigration imagination. So if you just to kind of unpack that, for that to be the case, that means in their minds, in their sick twisted minds, that these people thought that it was okay to stigmatize a black woman as being a highly skilled domestic worker, which she probably was, but that was it. There was nothing very much reported about her. They used it as the butt of their own joke, and it made them feel comfortable about themselves. It made them feel as though they still had power that they no longer had over this group of people, and that was it. And it was sickening. The pure fact that it was ever allowed to go inside of any form of media, cartoons included, was sickening. And quite frankly, it should have been something lost to time, but we can't really get past everything that's happened in the past without looking at it and learning from it. I just don't know. It's just real sickening. All right, another one being Uncle Tom. Uncle Tom, written by Harriet Beecher Stowe in 1852, featured the title character as a large, broad-chested, powerful made man whose truly African features were characterized by an expression of grave and steady good sense, united with much kindliness and benevolence. He forfeits his own chance at escaping bondage and losing his life to ensure the freedom of the slaves. The stereotype of Uncle Tom is innately submissive, obedient, and in constant desire of white approval. Term became popular during the Great Migration when many southern-born blacks moved to northern cities like New York, Chicago, and Detroit. With them, they brought codes of conduct expected in hostile Jim Crow environments. The stereotype was first publicly recorded during an address by Marcus Garvey's Universal Negro Improvement Association member, Reverend George Alexander McGuire, in 1919. Okay, so just to kind of unpack everything there, the whole niche about Uncle Tom is somebody who wants to be accepted by Caucasian people. So if you were ever faced with the unfortunate event of being called Uncle Tom. That means somewhere on the line, people in your group, people in your ethnicity think that you're trying so hard for the approval of a Caucasian man or woman that you would rather sacrifice everything that makes you black or relatively black, air quotes with that, just to appease them. Whether it's straightening your hair, whether it's changing the way you speak from more of an Ebonics slang type speaking into a more proper English based, speech. Or, bowing down to them whenever you need to get what you need. And that, those are kind of far stretched, but those are kind of general ideas that people would jump behind the term of Uncle Tom. Sapphire, this is one I haven't heard. The Sapphire caricature from 1800s through the mid 1900s popularly portrayed black women as sassy, emasculating, and domineering. Unlike the Mammy figure, this trope depicted African American women as aggressive, loud, and angry in direct violation of social norms. The Sapphire stereotype earned its name on a CBS television show, Amos and Andy, in association with the character Sapphire Stevens, airing from 1951 to 1953 with an all-black cast. Sapphire Stevens was the wife to George Kingfish Stevens, a character depicted as ignorant and lazy, fueling Sapphire's rage. During the Jim Crow period, when blacks were often beaten, jailed, or killed for arguing with whites, these fictional characters would pretend chastise whites, including men. Their assassins was supposed to indicate their acceptance as members of the white family, and acceptance that sassiness implied that slavery and segregation were not overly oppressive. Whew, that is a lot. So typical. And to be honest, it's something I've never heard of up until now. A sapphire is basically what they would call any woman now that has an opinion. Any black woman that has an opinion. They will call them rude. They will call them rash. They will brash. They would call them angry. They would call them aggressive, loud. Those are pretty descriptive adjectives to describe black women who are more than likely docile until provoked. And it's not like they're, animals and they just stay like, oh, maybe I should just stay over here until somebody comes and poke me. No, they are actual women with actual feelings and actual, opinions. So when you depict them as this, you're not only demeaning the African American woman, you're demeaning everything about her. You're demeaning the fact that she exists. The pure fact that this was acceptable in America is very sickening, because it just depicts us all as first of all, as black men in this so-called series is lazy and unmotivated to do anything, while the woman just does everything in the house, and the woman to be this hyperly aggressive, angry, loud woman who just can't help herself. And it's just how it is. It's not how it is, sir. It is not. Okay. Also, Jim Crow was literally the worst time for African Americans in this country. I do understand slavery was a thing, and second worst, I'll say, because slavery was horrible. Slavery was horrible. Jim Crow had to be a definite close second, and everything that happened after that just falls in line. I don't think we've ever caught really much of a break in this country, because every time, we kind of just shoehorned into everything and looked over. Oh, here it is, watermelon. If you don't know this one, I'm not going to explain this to you. Somehow we were associated with eating watermelon. And so all right, During the Jim Crow era, watermelon once symbolized self-sufficiency among African Americans. Following emancipation, many Southern African Americans grew and sold watermelons and became a symbol of their freedom. Many Southern whites reacted to the self-sufficiency by turning the fruit as a symbol of poverty. Watermelon came to symbolize the feast of unclean, lazy, and childlike. To shame black watermelon merchants, popular ads, and euphorium, whatever the word is, including postcards, picture African Americans stealing, fighting over, and sitting in streets eating watermelon eaten hand to mouth without utensils, made it impossible to consume without making a mess, therefore branded a public nuisance. As you see how a good thing can be turned into a bad thing, you also see how a bad thing can be turned to a good thing, but that's another topic for another video. But as you clearly just heard there, watermelon was at first a symbol of freedom for African Americans because that was the only thing that they had to offer and had to sell at that time in America. So if that's so hard, if that's such a disgrace that it hurts you so much, and I would just take you back to my last video. If it hurts you that much to see a black man or a black woman strive to succeed in a country that has literally used, abused, and tossed them to the other side of the corner, other side of history for that matter, I don't know what's wrong with you. But I digress. That's how it became a Mandingo. Y'all know. Not even about to read it. Y'all know. And that's it. That's kind of the most notable stereotypes. Other, noticeable ones is like black people never come on time. They're lazy. They don't want to do anything. They treat their women like shit. And these are kind of stereotypes that are true to this day. Well, not even true, that are sought after to this day, but some level of truth in there, because as you see that the typical, this generation of African American males are particularly not as fond of African American females as the ones prior, and they do treat them less than thou, and I do not understand that. A lot of them don't want to work. They just kind of want to take the easy route out of it, which is understandable because working sucks sometimes, but I understand that. But sometimes you just gotta suck it up. Being late thing, I don't know where that one came from. I don't know where it originated from. It was probably just because one nigga was late one day and they just kind of labeled it as such because that's what they did in that time because they had the power to. And these stereotypes are really, really weird and really sickening. If there's any stereotypes that I missed, just make sure you go ahead and shoot it in the comments below. Disco chat will be in the description. Kind of all the good stuff. Go ahead, like, comment, subscribe. ... Insert everything. Go ahead, follow your boy on Instagram. I'm gonna link that in the description too. And I'll see y'all next time. Okay, don't clip that. Don't. If you made it to the end of the video, do not talk about that. That was literally just on my dead on the fly. Don't you talk about it. I love you.